We typically measure the current state of our livestock industries by comparing them to conditions that existed a bit over a generation ago, in 1980, and we evaluate the industry trends that have materialized since then. Now, several events occurred in the 80s that profoundly influenced the trajectories of our livestock industries. In the early 80s, our nation faced an agricultural recession marked by a severe economic cost price squeeze that forced many livestock producers out of business. The 80s also marked the beginning of the deregulation era that signaled an end to aggressive antitrust enforcement and allowed meat packers to begin owning, controlling, and feeding livestock long before slaughter. And the 80s triggered what USDA called merger mania, a condition marked by meat packer mergers and acquisitions that resulted in only a handful of multinational meat packers dominating the marketplace. Now, every 5 years, Congress goes about the task of writing a farm bill to address America's food security needs by implementing reforms that supposedly ensure America's farmers and ranchers can continue producing an abundant and affordable supply of wholesome food. Since the 1981 Farm Bill, Congress has progressively amended each successive farm bill, thereby creating and recreating a legal framework within which each of our agricultural sectors operate, from crop farmers to livestock farmers and ranchers to dairy farmers. Of course, after each successive farm bill is enacted, the administration begins its rulemaking processes to write regulations for which to implement the farm bill's statutory requirements. Therefore, each successive farm bill redefines both the legal and regulatory framework within which each of our agricultural sectors function. Our focus today is on the grazing livestock sector, our nation's cattle and sheep industries. So since the 1981 Farm Bill, Congress has watched as our U.S. cattle and sheep industry shrank. We've lost 52% of our nation's beef cattle operations and over 60% of our nation's commercial sheep operations. Now, if Congress knew that our cattle and sheep industries were shrinking more and more each time they sat down to write a new farm bill, why didn't they reform the livestock sector's legal and regulatory framework to reverse its downward trajectory? Well, the answer is unsurprising. The 80s deregulation era marked a hands-off approach to the marketing practices of the meat packers and processors, which was a monumental shift from public policies of the past. That shift allowed the largest of corporations to maximize control over their respective supply chains. It resulted in a legal and regulatory framework that minimized what the multinational corporations viewed as government infringement on their right to conduct business as they saw fit in their quest to maximize profits. In other words, they got what they wanted in the 80s, and since then they've been fighting to maintain the status quo. They have since transformed their economic power, gained from their consolidation and concentration of the markets, into political power, gained from infiltrating producer groups, such as the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and the National Pork Producers Council, and of course, through their financial contributions to the political process. Since the 80s, the multinational meat packers and processors augmented the marketplace deregulation achieved in the 80s with trade deregulation achieved in the 90s, which afforded them with increased access to cheaper inputs from around the world. For going on 50 years, the multinational meat packers and processors, and now including their allied producer groups, have been hugely successful in maintaining a legal and regulatory framework for the grazing livestock sector that has solidified their control over the sector. This has allowed them to maximize their profits, all the while that hundreds of thousands of independent livestock producers, their livestock, and their markets were shrinking. Now, the 2026 Farm Bill marks a new opportunity for Congress to take a bold step to upset the status quo by rebalancing the grazing livestock sector's legal and regulatory framework in a way that levels the playing field between independent livestock producers and the dominant multinational meat packers, processors, and their allied lobbying groups. Now, this won't be easy. Those influential forces will fight vehemently to prevent needed market transparency, as would occur if the new Farm Bill reinstates mandatory country of origin labeling for beef. They'll fight against livestock procurement reforms that would reinstate competition as the determinant of livestock prices. And they'll fight against reform of the beef checkoff program that has helped them maintain the status quo. And they'll fight against trade reforms that help incentivize the rebuilding of our diminished grazing livestock herds. Congress can upset the status quo in the 2026 Farm Bill, but we need to help them, Now is the time to call your senators and tell them to be bold. With that, I'm Bill Bullard with RCAF USA, the voice of the independent cattle and sheep producer in the United States of America. Have a productive week, and thank you.